mugwumps. They're everywhere. They're speaking out at board meetings, city hall, town square, courthouse, state house, even the White House. They must be stopped. They are disruptors.
They're disruptors.
Welcome again, everyone, to Mugwump Media, and welcome to the handing of the torch to a new awakening generation here at Disruptor Central. Now, a prophetic pastor named Kim Clement, if you've ever heard of him, he spoke years ago of a strong generation to come that he called the warriors of the new millennium. Folks, I believe that they're here. Now, you wouldn't know that by listening to the news either. Over the last few years, Americans have been told by the mainstream media that traditional values and any hope of unity among Americans, as far as our younger generation, is over. As Christians, we believed in our hearts that that was a false narrative, and now we have the receipts. According to the Epoch Times, one of the most decisive crossovers for Trump in the 2024 presidential election was Gen Z voters, 18 to 29. 46% voted for him in this election, compared to 36% in 2020, according to AP Votecast. And almost half of Gen Z men, 49%, compared to Harris, 47%, broke for Trump. Trump also increased his share of women voters aged 18 to 44 by 6%. Now, how did this happen, you might be asking? Well, first of all, we now know that we can't believe pretty much anything that the mainstream media tells us. A good rule of thumb is that if the reporters' lips are moving, they are probably lying. But there are other factors at play. Now, today in our studio, we have Kevin at the soundboard microphone. Say hello, Kevin.
Hello, Juanita.
Very good. Hello, Kevin. We also have our good friend, Brian Rollman.
Howdy, everybody.
Howdy, Brian. So glad to have you here. And we have the great honor and privilege of visiting with one of these warriors of the new millennium, Mr. Brett Roussell.
Hello. Hello, Brett.
Welcome, Brett. So glad you're here. Now, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him. Brett is 17 years old. He's a junior at Ozark High School, and he has taken on the monumental task of forming a new chapter of Turning Point USA in his school. Now, before we hear Brett's story, and we want to hear his story, for those of you who don't know the full implication of who Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA is, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background. Because Charlie Kirk and his organization, and those like Brett, who are going to follow in his footsteps over the next few years, well, those are God's secret weapons to save America, really. Now, here's the background. In May of 2012, an 18-year-old Arlington Heights, Illinois high school student named Charlie Kirk gave a speech at Benedictine University's Youth Government Day. A retired entrepreneur and Tea Party activist named Bill Montgomery was in the audience, and he was extremely impressed with what he heard. He encouraged Charlie to postpone college and engage full-time in political activism. And a month later, the day after Charlie graduated from high school, they launched Turning Point USA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Now, since then, Turning Point USA has grown tremendously and has branched out. Its affiliate groups include Turning Point Endowment, Turning Point Action, and Turning Point USA Faith, which Brian's affiliated with. TPUSA has been described as the fastest growing organization of campus chapters in America. And according to the Chronicle of Higher Education, it's the dominant force in campus conservatism. Now, today, as I was browsing and researching TPUSA's influence during the 2024 election, I ran across a couple of articles that I thought you all would enjoy. I thought it described very well the influence of TPUSA and TPUSA Faith. Now, religiousnews.com gave a report on AmFest, of course, which is their big gathering. They had it in Arizona, correct? In Phoenix. They had it again this winter, which spoke specifically about 31-year-old Charlie, 31, this young man's 31, his efforts to get the Christians involved in the election. Now, the headline reads, "At Turning Point's USA AmFest, Charlie Kirk takes a victory lap for the Trump election." Well, they told the truth. He did have a lot to do with it, but they kind of made it look like he was some kind of a pompous little guy that took all the credit. That's not the truth with Charlie Kirk. When it goes on in the article and talks a little bit more about the speech, the opening speech that Charlie gave at AmFest, and in which he first and foremost humbly gave credit for Trump's victory to God. The person, or more importantly, who deserves credit, Charlie said, is God Almighty for saving this country. We were inches away from a civil war, and by the grace of God that we did not earn and we did not deserve, Trump's life was spared in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. That was well said, and I thought it was very humble. Now, he also eagerly gave credit not just to his own grassroots army, who chased ballots, poll watched, and seemed to be everywhere on November 5th, but he also gave credit to tens of thousands of pastors and church leaders who, through TPUSA's training, learned to speak boldly and encourage their congregations to vote. That's a praise to God. And man, I'm so thankful that he did that. He's starting to wake the church up. According to Brett Galazewski, Turning Point Action's National Enterprise Director, Turning Point Action and like-minded organizations increased the rate of participation of certain sectors of Trump-supporting faith voters from 50% to close to 95%. That's huge. Now, the article that I loved, because it was published from a liberal trash rag on November 8th, and they had to tell the truth. They were basically forced to tell it, but they turned the screws whenever they were able to, of course, even if it was a little bit skewed. It was Newsweek, of course. On November 8th, the headline read, "How Charlie Kirk's Brainwash Tour Helped Reelect Trump." Now, I don't know if you guys saw on YouTube the videos of all these visits to colleges with Vivek Ramaswamy, others he had with him. And oh my goodness, he would engage and debate students on topics ranging from the economy to immigration to liberal bias and academia, which is
not
great.
just students there, Juanita. A lot of times those were professors that would come up to the mic as well. So
great. That is awesome. And of course, what they were talking about was officially called the You're Being Brainwashed Tour. Now, it was originally scheduled as a 4-stop jaunt, but it ultimately swelled to 25 colleges. Can you imagine all the college students that were engaged? And on further, in that article, it talks about one of his representatives said that they would bring out boxes of the red hats, and you would have students fighting over these red hats and wanting to wear them. Love it.
I've got a team I'm wanting to put together here. I would love to see Charlie Kirk and Mark Twain.
The mugwumps.
Yes,
absolutely.
Charlie Kirk is definitely that same spirit.
we'll find a DeLorean
There you go.
and make sure Doc Brown has it set up for us.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I love it. I love it.
One of Mark Twain's my favorite saying, if you don't read the newspapers, you're uninformed. If you do read the newspapers, you're misinformed. And Charlie has a way of going ahead and explaining what is real and what is not.
For sure. Well, those videos, as we were saying, they absolutely went viral. And according to spokesman Andrew Colvett, he said everywhere that they would go, all the kids would come up and say, "I follow you on TikTok. I follow you on YouTube. I love your videos." So these kids who weren't supposed to enjoy this stuff were really enjoying this.
I wonder how viral Mark Twain would have went had he had the internet in his day.
The mugwumps, I know. Colvett went on to say that Kirk's direct connection with young voters factored heavily into Trump's victory. I think that's a really an understatement. He said, "We were tapping into a lot of pent-up frustration. Over COVID," he said. "These are kids that their proms and graduations were robbed from them. And they were looking at an America where they were told to downsize their American dream. It's the first generation that didn't feel like they were ever going to be able to own a home, and we were tapping into that." And that's the truth. He also went on to say, it was an amazing thing to watch. What you'd end up seeing is this sea of red hats of college kids, of Gen Z kids who were never supposed to be conservatives. They were basically rebelling against a system that told them that they weren't allowed to do that. And that is an absolute welcome to the 1960s, because that's what happened in the 60s. Young people are always going to rebel against the bull that they see going on in politicians. And that's what they saw. They saw this liberal garbage, and they decided, nope, don't believe it. And they decided to go ahead and do the opposite. Kirk's tour allowed some students to have the courage to make their conservative political beliefs known, particularly in liberal educational settings, Colvett said, and to be proud of their beliefs and to buck the system, he continued, and it just caught fire. It absolutely caught fire.
So much of what we see, Juanita, and Brett is living this right now, right? But these notes that we see, from these people commenting on Charlie Kirk,
yes,
he talks about this pent-up frustration, and especially because of what happened with COVID and how these students, whether they're college students or high school students, they're recognizing they're being told what to think. They're not being taught how to think.
That's right.
And I want Brett to comment on that a little bit,
yes.
But because your experience, you're a little bit behind that, right? So what were you in 5th, 6th grade when the whole COVID shutdown, all of that was going on?
6th grade.
Yeah, 6th grade. That's a very formative time, right? Because those elementary childhood friendships kind of get bound together as you move through puberty and go through junior high into high school.
Yep.
And that got shut down on you guys a lot. And then you were being told, no, you have to think the same way we think.
Yeah.
So I'll let you comment on that a little bit.
Yeah. We missed out on the entire almost 4th quarter of our 6th grade year. And then going into the next year, it seemed like every week there was kids gone because the school was quarantining them for X, Y, and Z. Even if they didn't have COVID, it was just if you came into contact with anybody, you were getting quarantined. Whether you were sick, had symptoms, and even if you took the test and had positive, they would still quarantine, or negative, and they would still quarantine you for the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was almost like, well, you just have to think the way that they want you to think. You have to do whatever they say, however they see fit.
You guys are probably seeing that going, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody could make sense of any of it.
And too often, people who are in positions of power, whether that's teachers or politicians or whoever that is, they look at younger generations, especially we say kids, right? And they say, you don't need to know. But we got to remember, kids are people too.
Yeah.
Right? And how often though, when you're sitting there, do you think that helps shape how you think about how you're engaging with the teachers now, or how you're engaging with your classmates? Did that change you?
Yeah, it almost felt like since we were so young when it happened, they didn't feel like they needed to tell us what was happening or explain anything to us. Mm-hmm. So going into junior high and high school, it kind of, we weren't sure if they were explaining everything to us, and we had to ask those questions, follow-up questions every X, Y, and Z over certain things because we didn't know how much they were actually telling us and how little we actually knew.
Yeah.
Over the course.
So to break that down a little simpler, Juanita, our generation, Juanita and I, we were raised thinking we were being lied to, but everything seemed to be okay outside of us. But your generation seems like you know.
Yeah. It almost seems like that, and it seems like everybody's tired of it. They're tired of being lied to, so it's kind of the pent-up aggression. It is real, and they're just sick of being lied to, and they're ready to change it. So
how do you navigate that? If in any structure or anything you're in, knowing what you know at your age, you're obviously frustrated with the conversations when someone tells you something that you know is not true. How do you parse that out?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's been hard. It's had us up and down. But when somebody tells us something and we know it's not true, it's kind of, we have to second guess almost everything. We have to think about it. We'll get together in little groups sometimes and just talk about certain things that were said during a lecture or something at school. We're like, well, that almost seems so far-fetched, it's not even possible. And then we'll break it down and we'll ask a question. And then they'll kind of backtrack and go back on it a little bit. and then they'll tell us, oh, well, it was wrong. And they'll finally admit to it.
So,
yeah.
This was going to be one of my questions for you, Brett, because you're very conservative, obviously.
Yes.
Do you have a little pod of friends there? Do you have quite a few friends that are conservative?
Yeah. At Ozark, it's a pretty conservative school for as far as the student body. For teachers and administration, I can't really speak to that from outside of the experiences I've had with them. We have a pretty tight knit group of. There's probably seven of us on the Turning Point board, and we're all pretty conservative. We're pretty tight knit.
So let me ask you this: you said that whenever you hear things being said, that you're like, come on.
Yeah.
That's not the truth.
Yeah.
So when you guys get together and you're all like, and you're reasoning and you're talking, so do you come up and challenge the teacher?
Yeah. So depending on what's said, how extreme it is, I'll either ask them a question in class or I'll wait till after class so I don't have to put them on the spot and they're able to explain it to me a little bit better. Because sometimes I'm just slow to learn it. Yes. So I have to, maybe I'm just second guessing it for no reason. But then I'll ask the questions, they won't be able to explain it. And then we just
shows discernment.
Yes.
Yeah.
That you don't smart off, that you guys don't gang up and try to be unruly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're not trying to play gotcha. We're just trying to figure out what's right and wrong in
Good for
the
you.
system.
So what I'm hearing there is you're respecting everyone and everyone's rights.
Yeah.
And you're having conversations and you're thinking things through and you're having discussions to see and identify the truth yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you and your friends that you're talking about there, when you have those conversations and you feel that you're being lied to, right? Something just doesn't make sense. Do you have a test, a way of finding what is true?
Yeah, so we'll talk through it, we'll think through it, we'll do a little bit of our own research to see if it's actually true, and if it is, like, to what extent, how far are they actually taking it? And we'll think through it all logically. We'll put it all together, all the research, all the thoughts, and then we'll be able to discern whether or not it's true.
Good. Excellent.
And so you guys talk through that. You use logic, which is good.
Yeah.
You guys have a standard that you look at? Like, what is the measuring stick of truth?
Yeah. So typically what we think about is, like, precedent, like what has happened, if certain things it's happened before, or if it happens again. And we'll just think through it and be like, well, that doesn't make sense. There's no precedent for that. There's nothing to back it. They have no evidence for it. Things like that.
So you're looking for evidence.
Yes.
You're not just looking for what somebody has told you.
Right.
You want them to prove.
Yeah, we want them to be able to prove it to
what
us.
is going on. In Acts and in some of Paul's epistles, we see that lived out in a Christian way, right? Because it's noted in Acts that when Paul went and he spoke to those at Berea, he said that those Bereans were more noble because they didn't just take at face value what they were being told. They questioned and they searched and they went back and they said, okay, well, what do we know is true? And there it says they searched the scriptures to see if what they were being taught matched what was true. And, things that we can do now, right? If somebody's teaching you history, that sounds kind of weird, right? We can go and look for sources. And this is some of the things that Charlie talks about, right? When he's questioning students, or when you watch some of those videos where they come up, he's saying, how do you know, right? Or does that make sense? Or even some of the conservative students who are asking him questions, he'll push back to see, are they actually using their reasoning and logic based on what is true evidence, and where do they find the truth? So, I'm sure that's what you were describing. That's things that you guys do.
Yeah.
Something that I ponder a lot right now. We go to library board meetings. We go to school board meetings. And what I see is a lack of respect for different groups of people. I see a lack of respect for one another. And in these board meetings, it gets very contentious sometimes. And it's basically just basic decorum. In our Capitol, we saw the Democrats just recently act like children. If someone in my class in school would have acted like that, we'd have been taken in the office and we'd have been beat with a paddle by the principal. you're growing up in that, and the adults in your world, as you see them act like that, what's your thought? How are you going to, are you okay with that? Are you trying to figure out how to address them? Are you trying to figure out how to make them explain to you? Are you just trying to figure out how to navigate to where you can go ahead and you can move into those places and go ahead and start being an example?
Take over.
Yeah. Well, let's just go ahead and say your generation of disruptors, because you're not going to put up with this stuff. It is not okay, and you know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we see stuff like that going on, we just think it's so immature. It's how they can even think to act like that. It just doesn't make any sense to us that when we see them going out and acting like that, it doesn't set a good example for the younger people. Like at our age, at 16, 17, we know pretty well what's right and wrong. We know what to do and what not to do. But people younger than us, they see stuff like that happening in the media, and it just doesn't set a good example for them. It's just not a good way to carry yourself.
Did you have an opportunity to watch Trump's State of the Union speech that he gave?
I got to watch it.
That was
pretty
revealing.
Did you and your friends talk about it?
Oh, yeah, we've talked about it. We've talked about it quite a bit. Yeah,
I bet you have.
Yeah.
And you probably thought exactly about it like we do. So
yeah,
crazy, absolutely nuts. They've gone stark raving mad.
Yes.
So what's some of the takeaways that you had from that speech? What did you hear in there that jumped out at you? Or even as Kevin was saying, some of the responses from both sides of the aisle as he would talk. What did you see, and how does that shape what you're thinking about?
Yeah, listening to Trump speak, it gives us an America first sense. He's putting America first, and so for so long it's been put at the back burner almost, because he's starting to put America first, and it almost seems that the Democratic Party is mad about that. They don't like that America is being put first in politics and in foreign policy with the tariffs and things like that. And it almost seems
they're losing their money.
Yeah, they're
That's
losing
the problem.
The lobbyists aren't paying out anymore.
Yeah.
They're losing their cash, Brett.
Yeah.
So, and that just goes ahead and takes it to the corruption level. You obviously see the corruption there.
Yes.
So, how many of you are there? That is something that I would love to know. How many? If say out of 10 students, how many are conservative? In your generation.
In our generation, I would probably say, depending on where we're at in our school or in our area, it ranges, but typically a majority is conservative. They're sick and tired of the way that it's been done for so long.
Yes.
They're over it. They want to make it new. They don't want to do the same old things that have been done for so long.
I love to visit with you guys.
Yes.
Well, I see them everywhere. I was stopped at a celebration of life the other day by a young man, and I couldn't place him immediately, but he's like, "Oh, I used to talk to you all the time. I always talk to people at Walmart. I like to talk to the young ones that are your age. They're hardworking. They get out there and they work. And I'll say, "How's your day going?" And they'll say, "Well, this happened and that happened." And I listen to them. And what amazes me? This is what's amazing. Generations before yours, it's like they had an attitude toward adults. I don't notice that as much in your generation.
No.
I notice it. It's like that young man. He walked up and he said, I haven't seen you for a while. How you doing? And he just immediately looked me right in the eye. And this is the thing that I notice with your generation is there's no patronizing for old people. They're old, You seem like you sincerely want to talk to people. And there's just a different air about you guys. There really is. And you've got it too. I can see it in you. It's good. Yeah. It's very good.
I mean, for me, growing up, my mom would not tolerate disrespect, so I've always been taught to respect people. But I've always loved to talk to people, so I mean, it's always been a good combo.
I can tell. That was going to be my next question for you. Your mom and dad must be proud of you.
Yeah,
and I would just bet that they're pretty conservative.
Yes. Yes.
I would have figured. Very good. So you grew up in probably a pretty solid conservative home.
Yeah.
It's very neat. And you attend church?
Yes.
Yep. A church in Springfield, you had said. Yeah.
You can give a shout out to your church there.
Yeah, Berean Baptist Church in Springfield. It's a great place to go. If you're ever looking for somewhere to go.
There you go.
We're always open.
Awesome.
There you go.
Awesome.
It's a great place to go.
So are you strike me as a leader. You're just a natural leader. You're well-spoken. You called me today to check in and say, hey, are we still on for tonight?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, sure. Well, thanks for calling, Brett. And I thought, cool.
Yeah.
Do you lead in other things? do you take leadership roles in other things?
Yeah. So I'm in student council and I'm running for student body president actually.
Of
And then
course
I'm
you
Turning
are.
Point. I'm on the board of YEPO and I'm in Honor Society, so I'm
Yes.
looking to get on the board there too.
Yes.
Yeah, so and I do a little bit of work with the AFP here and there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, that is so awesome. Well, like I said, I can just bet that your mom and dad are probably pretty proud of you. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. Yeah, I have 2 sisters and a brother.
Okay, very good. Do you fight a lot?
A little bit. A little bit.
I'd be concerned if you didn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to have him take a jump back there for just a second.
Sure.
Because he ran through those leadership things really fast.
There you go.
And I bet there's a lot of people who don't know what all those acronyms that you threw out there were.
Yeah, there you
so
go.
if you could walk through those real fast, kind of let us know those organizations, who they are, and if there's something that as a leader in those organizations you'd like people to know about. Yeah, this is a good opportunity for you to kind of promote those a little bit too.
Yeah, so YEPO, it's a branch of YEP. It stands for Youth Empowerment Project. YEPO is the Youth Empowerment Project of the Ozarks. What we volunteer several times throughout the year with Convoy of Hope and the Heartland and all those things, just trying to help out the less fortunate, trying to get some things done. And then Honor Society, we do pretty well the same thing. It's through the school, and we volunteer a lot. We try to get, each person has to complete 15 hours of volunteering to get their accord at graduation or whatever it may be, and then 5 hours of a personal project, something that you think is important and that you want to work with. You have to complete 5 hours of that as well. Yeah, and then
a lot of extracurricular stuff there.
Yeah, I'm in quite a few.
And you mentioned AFP.
Yeah, I do. So right now they're trying to get the zero income tax bill passed, and we've done a lot of work trying to get that done. Most recently, we were at the VFW 2 weeks ago, and then they were in Webb City last weekend trying to get it passed.
And who are they?
Americans for Prosperity.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a good organization.
You kind of alluded to it here just a little bit, but you're growing up in a world where there's people all around that have no apparent standard. What is your standard?
Yeah. So growing up, I was always, my grandpa, he's an old school Baptist preacher, so he always had a standard for all of us. And then my mom, she set the standard for us. We had to respect everybody. We had to have a good attitude. So I kind of approach everything having a good attitude, being respectful, trying to see what people think and how they think. And we just want to go from there, whether we agree or disagree. And it's always good. It's always fun when we disagree. We can talk about it and try and convince them.
Okay. Now, Juanita and I, we didn't grow up in a church. So something that was always foreign to us was biblical principles.
Yes.
We always kind of knew what was right, and we could definitely identify when something was wrong. But you sounds like you've been raised with biblical principles.
Yes.
You're familiar with the Bible. You've been to Sunday school, and you've been. Sounds like you've got a pastor or two that you admire and you respect. So there are some good leaders and some good examples in your world. So the whole generation is not devoid of role models. Mm-hmm. So who would be your let's say over 50-year-old mentor?
Yeah, it'd be my grandpa. Yeah,
Okay.
he's the one who really got me interested in politics. Since I've been little, he always said I would be a senator or something like that.
Your grandpa, the
Yeah.
pastor?
Yeah, he always said,
Really?
yeah.
Now that's kind of a conflict in this world today.
This is great. I love to hear this.
He always said I would be a senator or something like that. He always knew I would be involved in politics in some way, even before I was. He's passed about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So he never really got to see me kind of actually start getting involved. But yeah, so he always knew I would be involved in some way.
Huh. That's very interesting.
That's very cool.
Yes.
Brian said something earlier. Starting this, because you're 17 and you're a junior, so you're going to be out of school next year. Starting this, there's a lot of responsibility because you are starting an affiliated, TPUSA club, and there's some responsibilities with that. So you're going to be doing this, this year, next year. What do you think? What's your vision for when you leave it?
Yeah.
What's your vision for your club? And I guess what got you into the thought of start? Because Lord knows you've got lots of other responsibilities you're doing, lots of leadership, but you obviously felt that this was something that needed to be done and you wanted to take it on. So I guess what's your vision for this group while you're here? Where do you want to take it? And what do you see happening? What do you see when you leave leaving with Ozark High School?
Yeah. So I want to start with how I kind of got it started. So
please.
When I was at First Baptist earlier, or I think it was September, maybe
September
They did the
9th.
Cultural Impact Conference. Yes. And I was there. I went to that.
We were there too.
Yes, it was great.
It was.
I went to that, and there was a Turning Point table there, and I really didn't know much about Turning Point up until that point. I'd seen the Charlie Kirk videos on my For You page on TikTok and things like that.
Like everybody else.
Yeah. So I knew a little bit about it, and then I got to talking to my field rep Nathan, and he asked me if my school had a Turning Point chapter, and if we didn't, if I would be interested in starting one. So I said, yeah, I would be interested. So we kind of talked a little bit there, and then we exchanged information. He was able to tell me more about it, and I was like, yeah, I like this. I agree with all of it. So he helped me start the chapter, and we've been going good since then. So over the next year until I graduate, I want to keep scaling the chapter. I want to get as many people involved as possible. I want them to know what we stand for and what we want to happen. And then, so in my chapter, we have a good group of kids that are sophomores and freshmen who can take over the chapter once I graduate or the rest of the board graduates. So I want it to keep going after I graduate. I want it to keep scaling. I want it to keep growing. I want people to stay informed. I want them to keep telling the people what the conservative values are, what the Christian values are, and how and why we believe them, things like that.
So growth. You've got a vision for you're going to work as hard as you can, bring as many in as you can, and then set it going good before you leave.
Yes, that's the goal.
Good.
So flash back into the future. I guess that'd be flashing forward. Senator Brett.
There you go.
That would be awesome. It sounds to me like you would not lose focus on where you came from and your town and your classmates. It sounds like you're building lifelong relationships.
Yeah.
And you value those.
Yes.
Did you happen to get to speak to Josh Hawley at the church when he was there?
I spoke to him a little bit there. I've spoken to him a couple times since.
What did you ask him? I have to ask that.
Yeah, I asked him about how he got interested in politics. What made him want to run for Senate? What made him want to see that? What he told me, just all the stuff he saw going on in D.C.
Yes.
How he knew he could change it. He knew he could make a difference. And he said that God just led him to the decision to run, and he did it. And he's been doing good ever since. He's been doing some good stuff.
So what did you take away from that?
Yeah, ultimately, I have to listen to what the Lord tells me to do. If he wants me to run for office or what he wants me to do, I have to follow that.
Very good. That's a good answer.
And you said you want to go into law?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's good. That's good. That's awesome. There is a big need, both nationally and in the state of Missouri. There is a huge need. And I don't know if you've been listening to our podcasts about the Brave 10 in Jefferson City. I don't know if you have or not, but there's a small group, and I think they actually call themselves the Remnant. There's a small group that is starting to make a difference, really, because they're voting solid, I think their courage. We did an interview with Justin Sparks, was the last one we did, and he was the one that ran against the one who was ultimately chosen as the Speaker of the House. But it was so good because he talked about it, the very same thing. He said, I'm doing whatever God tells me to do, and they're so neat. They want to serve their constituents, and they want to do what God tells them to do. I think you would be a great fit. I really do. I could see you in Jefferson City.
Yeah,
I really could. Our state could use you. Somebody that doesn't care about getting a pension or getting a committee or getting a parking spot. Yeah. Somebody that wants to be there for the right thing.
Yeah, none of that matters to me. Yeah, it's just what's best for the people and what the Lord would have me to do. It's just that's what I think about when I do these things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We definitely need people with a biblical worldview.
Yes.
Going into these areas. And, we say areas of leadership. We talk about, public officials and those kind of things. But we really got to get back into that mindset that these offices are public servants.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You should have a servant mindset and a servant heart when you go into those. And really the only true way you can do that is what you've already said, right? I want to be submissive and I want to follow what God is telling me to do. That means we have put ourselves under the authority of God.
Yes.
And recognized where true authority comes from, because then we can actually speak to how authority should be done, right?
Yeah.
And You talked about getting the club started there, getting the Turning Point chapter started. I kind of wanted to follow that up because, there's probably going to be some high schoolers listening, maybe some younger folks who are listening who are thinking in this same mindset. How much time and effort did that take for you to do?
Yeah, so to get it started, my field rep helped a lot along the way. I mean, it took a lot of effort to get it off the ground and get members involved. Mm-hmm. But since then, the board has helped so much. If you get a good 5 people, you just need 5 good people to help you get it off the ground, and it will take you so far. Because we've been able to grow it to 52 members now since starting it, so it's been great. It took a lot of effort to get it to where it is now, and it's going to take even more effort to keep it growing. But
would you say it's something that was really hard, or is it just something that just takes time?
It just takes time.
Okay.
It's not hard. It's just going to take some time and commitment to get it done.
Yeah. So you just need a little commitment, a little stick-to-itiveness.
Yes.
That's really awesome. You said something that reminds me of, I'm a kid. I just sort of squirrel. I jump back and forth.
Yeah.
You said something that I really liked. You said that whenever you went to that meeting at First Baptist.
Yes.
And you said that you were listening to the speakers and you thought, this is what I believe. This is what I believe.
Yes.
And, you'd been watching Charlie Kirk, you'd been watching his Brainwash tour and being inspired by that and by the truth that you heard. And I know what you were thinking. You were thinking, well, I believe that.
Yeah.
And you'd hear the speakers up there, the people, the professors and the students saying really dumb things. And you're like, wow, that's really dumb.
Yeah.
What you described is exactly what happened to me, but it didn't happen until I was in my 30s because I was just kind of la, 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 la. I was just kind of, not paying a whole lot of attention, just living life. I was married. I had little kids. And I can remember one night, and anybody out there my age remembers Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
And I can remember the first time I ever heard him. That's what brought to mind. I thought the same thing. I was watching late night TV. It was before we recognized how crazy the news was becoming. But I was listening to Nightline, just kind of listening to the news. And then all of a sudden at 11 o'clock, here comes this guy. And it was his TV show, which didn't last very long. But then, of course, after his TV show was off, I tuned into his radio. But he started talking, and I thought, that's what I think. And I listened the next night and the next night. And when his TV show went off, I thought, man, I'm not going to get to. And then I thought, no, he's on radio. He said he's on radio. So then I tracked him down on radio.
Yeah.
And, he passed away in February of 2021. And I bawled like a baby, just cried like a baby whenever he passed away because what you described and what I felt and what all these Gen Zers that were flipping through TikTok and saw what was going on, that's the wake-up moment. When you realize, what Rush used to call people heads full of mush. What was it he used to say? Just that kids are just kind of heads full of mush. They don't know what they think until they're put on the spot, and then they realize what's truth. And that was kind of how I approached, how I became conservative too. Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a shared moment there.
Yes.
Very good.
So, Brett, do you think, or if you kind of roll back through your head a little bit, you were raised in a good, godly family, it sounds like, and you have conservative parents. But I know Juanita's asked this question before for others. What was your aha moment? What kind of woke you up and said, I have to be engaged? That this wasn't just something that your parents did. This just wasn't something that your family did. This was something that you went, no, this is me. I have to be engaged. So what was your aha moment?
Yeah, so it goes back probably a few years. And I was scrolling through Instagram or YouTube or something like that, and I saw those Turning Point videos. And one video that really made me think about it, really resonated with me. It was an abortion video. He was talking about abortion.
Yeah.
And they thought that you should be able to have abortion to term. And I was just listening to that, and it just flipped a switch in me. It was like, it's wrong. It's not something that should be happening. It's not something that we should be allowing. So listening to that, it kind of got me engaged, and I've kind of been following politics and that was just the tip of the iceberg. And then I started getting more watching more of his videos and seeing more of what they stood for and what they were doing, and just saw all the things that was going on in DC and in the US and how bad it is, how evil it is. It's not something that we should be having.
Yeah.
And it just flipped a switch in me. I was like, I can do more. I can do more than just sitting here and watching these videos. I can get involved.
Yeah,
How long ago was that?
That was probably about a year and a half ago. And when I really flipped a switch and was like, there's more, I can do more. And started working with some conservative candidates in Springfield and trying to help them get elected.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've been doing some of that. Charlie Kirk did too.
Yep.
Even before, like he was probably 16, 17 years old, probably your age.
Yeah.
And he was a politician whose last name was Kirk. I was reading that in my deep dive today. So he did the very same thing. You're kind of like Charlie Kirk. You got some of that quality going on.
Well, and the life issue is your generation is the most pro-life generation
Yes.
out of the last 4 generations.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, there's lots of research out there talking about this.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that has to do with you guys are recognizing and having an understanding of how much of your generation is missing,
Yeah.
right? When you think
Yes.
about that,
Yeah.
Right.
because there is a lot of people who said it's not really a life, we can get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing these arguments now being made, and it's in your face because you said that's kind of your aha moment. You saw these arguments, you're like, wait a second, that makes no sense whatsoever. A baby is alive.
Yes. I'm watching those videos. I've always known it was wrong because I've grown up in church and I've known that God is the giver and taker of life.
Yes.
He gets to decide. It's not up to us
Yes.
if a baby gets to live or die in the womb.
Amen.
That baby should
Yeah.
be able to live.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Yeah. So I've always known that it's wrong, but listening to those videos, it flipped a switch, and I was
Well, and
it made me mad. It was just
Yeah.
yes.
not something that should be happening.
And I don't know. I don't remember exactly what. I need to do some research. One of the things we're going to be talking about probably as the voting starts in Jefferson City, and they're starting to, as this session progresses. One of the, and I'm sure
Or
Brian
digresses.
Yeah.
Brian knows about this
Yeah.
too. I'm sure the fix that they now have for that absolutely evil piece of, it wasn't even legislation, it was an initiative petition,
Yeah.
which that needs fixed really badly before they pass a bunch of other garbage. But the fix basically entails giving exceptions. Well, most people are like, oh, great, well, we won't have, Amendment 3 anymore. Well, okay, some of the babies will live, but
Yeah.
then what about the exceptions?
Yeah.
There's a lady, and I think I've been talking to Bert, and he's going to try to get us connected, but there's a lady named Rebecca. I don't remember what her last name is, but she actually was the lady that was on Mike Moon's video.
Yeah.
She was a product of rape. And she was a beautiful, well-spoken, intelligent lady.
Yep.
And she said, I am hurt and offended that I'm one of the few exceptions. That I would be basically, it would be okay to kill me.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
It's like what Charlie Kirk says. It's there. Why would you do evil in the face of evil?
Yes.
When you can do
And
good,
that's
bring that baby,
beautiful.
let that baby be born.
Well said.
Why would you do evil in the face of evil when you
Well
can do
said.
good in the face of evil?
And it would require sacrifice from the person that would carry the child. But God expects all of us to sacrifice.
Yes.
We're how dare we be so spoiled that we think we're going to make it through this life unscathed and happy with each day and la-di-da-di-da, tiptoe through the tulips. Bad things happen. They do.
Yeah.
But what you said was beautiful. You said, why compound evil with another evil act?
Yeah.
Yeah. That and Down syndrome, the abnormalities, you see so many little kids that have Down syndrome that, oh my goodness, they're beautiful.
Yes.
And they're so innocent, so
Yes.
sweet and loving. So why is it that some people it's okay to kill them and some it's not?
Right.
So I figured you would feel that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got to ask for a definition.
Yeah.
Define conservative for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I like it.
That's nice and easy.
It's a nice, easy definition. So, conservative, the values that we were founded on, the limited government, the things like that, limited government, no government overreach. We don't want the government reaching into our everyday lives, affecting us in ways that they shouldn't be. We want to conserve those freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the things that we were founded on that have kind of been infringed upon lately. We want to keep those values conservative. Yeah.
How would you define biblical principles in that circumstance?
Yeah. So I've always grown up in the church. So biblical principles, the things that we see in the Bible, we should be following those principles. Like the Great Commission, we should be bringing God's word to the rest of the world. It's something that should be done. So I think that we should take those principles, and I know a lot of people believe in the separation of church and state, but I think that those biblical principles in God should help you when you're bringing legislation forward, when you're moving to make those changes in politics.
Yes. You got to have a foundation in something, and if you don't have a standard that's better than me, for sure.
Yes.
But obviously, if we're ever left in charge of anything, it will be corrupted before it's over with. We've got enough history to kind of cover that. I think we've got the evidence is overwhelming.
Yes, we do.
But that standard and that grace and that mercy that God has is so necessary for things to work. Without that, we went through 4 years of just absolute degradation of our society, and it's been frightening how evil and how far out from. I didn't feel safe anymore. I was concerned for our children, concerned for our government. I was not even sure if our country was going to survive that. It was getting to the point to where evil was becoming very dominant.
Yeah.
So the biblical principles are something that, do you feel that they're absolutely necessary,
Yes.
or do you think there's any compromise there?
I think they're absolutely necessary. If you do anything without God, you will ultimately fail.
Very good.
Yes. You need to have him.
Yes, that's well said. Yes.
And I think all of us, you probably recognize as we do. I remember getting up. I don't believe the news, but man, whenever they're just pouring it on and telling you how wonderful Kamala is and just the whole 9 yards and, oh man, she's the greatest thing since sliced bread. She's going to crown her queen tomorrow. She's going to be it. And, whenever that was going on, I told Kevin, I said, I'm going to bed. I can't stay up. It's too nerve-wracking. He woke me up and he goes, come on in here. You need to see it. And I remember going in and sitting, and it was almost surreal, looking at their watch party, and they were quiet.
Yes.
And all you saw was red hats in the air.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was that we all prayed for this. And God spared us. I think this was absolutely something that was given to us by God, because of all of us were forced to see what the future would look like if he didn't intervene.
He's giving us that chance to turn back to him, to come back to him and change our ways. Yes.
He absolutely is.
This is quite an awakening, and your generation is here for this time. I've always, when I was younger, I used to worry about my kids being around in the end times. And, we don't know when the end is.
Right.
You know what? We need to live each and every day to the fullest. I mean, we can't, there's not a second to waste any time. We got to plan for things to be around for however long. How was it that Justin said it? He said it really well. You know what? Go back and listen to that podcast.
Yeah.
Justin put it really well. But your generation, you're here for such a time as this, and that's quoted out of Esther so much. But you're the generation that God's put here at this turning point. Ironic, the turning point name. It's not ironic. There's a lot of meaning to these things.
That's another God thing.
Yes.
I really do.
But your generation is going to do this, and you're going to be here for this. And I think you're going to see wonderful things. I think you've got a long, hard road ahead of you. But I see in your eyes, and I see in your generation just an absolute dogged determination to go ahead, and you're going to make things right. You have a confidence in that. The confidence comes out, but are you fearful as well, or do you? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're scared. We don't want our country to go so far that it's almost so hard to get back. We don't want us to go so far that we can't turn around and start doing the right things again. But we have the confidence that we can keep them from going so far that we can't come back.
Well,
Absolutely.
and you've got people that are here
Yes.
that are like Kevin and I are.
Yes.
You know, we didn't necessarily want to start a podcast, but we felt like God wanted us to. And we felt like this was the best way to get some information out and to introduce people to the good stuff. You know, we try to tell them the good stuff. You know, don't stop listening to the news.
Right.
Tune in, listen to good sources.
Right.
Brian's another one. Man, Brian just works tirelessly doing his constitutional coach work with Patriot Academy.
Well,
Yeah,
to mention on that real fast, one of the things that you were saying, right, that and what Juanita was saying, this is definitely, I think it's clear that God has answered prayer.
Yes.
And he has given a space of time for our country to repent, for our nation to turn.
Yep.
Right? He's heard the cry of his people, and he's made a space. But it's up to his people to step up and do what they need to do. And David Barton and Rick Green, several times lately on their Wall Builders show, I've heard them say, because you know, if you listen to David Barton has been out there for now 30 plus years, you know, working to intervene and get people to wake up. Right? He has tirelessly worked, and you see the things he's written and all the videos and all the education that he has done. And they based the name Wall Builders out of Nehemiah, right? Because they went back. Nehemiah took people back to go rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But it's interesting because David and Rick lately have been saying, we thought for all these years we were trying to rebuild the walls. And what we've realized is all this time that we've spent has been in preparation, petitioning the king so that the king would be willing to allow the walls to be rebuilt. And they said, now we see this opening happening in front of us, and all these people and this rising generation coming in who will be the ones who have now awakened. And they're the ones who have the bricks and the trowels, and they're going to have the swords on their sides and the bows slung around their back, while they are the ones rebuilding the walls. And they will have these tools, right? And so to be able to help this rising generation, your generation, to be equipped in that way, because you already see it. But knowing that, yes, there's work to be done. And how are we going to do that? The message that you're putting out there, that you've already said, right? We're going to do that by the strength that God is going to give us. But that is a call, like you said, that is a Great Commission call. And when we see in Matthew 28, right, so many people say we're to go out and we're to get people saved. Really, it's a discipleship mandate. Yes. Right?
Yes, agreed.
People commit their lives in discipleship, and that is the salvation that we see explained in, it's not saying a prayer, it's not doing something, right? It's actually submitting ourselves to God and understanding that only because of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ are we able to have a relationship, right?
Yes.
But that discipleship mandate that we have from Matthew 28 isn't just in this separated off spiritual area of life. And you're seeing that because that's some of the things you've said tonight. It's going to be everywhere. There is no separation of church and state, if you will.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Because that's telling us you keep your spiritual stuff over there and we'll keep our secular stuff over here.
Right.
Find that in the Bible for me.
Right.
Right? And,
Yes.
and you can challenge your friends on that. You know, if you have friends or classmates that, well, what about separation of church and state? Okay, do we believe that because you're going to have Christian friends who are going to make that argument with you. And they're going to tell you shouldn't be involved in this political stuff because that's not spiritual. And you have to have that inner fortitude and that strength in the scripture and that prayer shield. And that's a huge thing. That's why, before we started recording, Kevin said a prayer over this, right? And why do we say prayer over everything that we do before we get started? It's because we want God's blessing on that. And in prayer, we acknowledge that He is in charge. And He's going to show us things to do, and then we're obedient and following in those things. But that that idea that there has now been an opening for your generation to step in
Yes.
and be equipped and to seek out that equipping, which this turning point chapter that you guys have started is a tremendous equipping opportunity.
Yes.
Right. And I know you're doing classes. What kind of education are you doing right now to help equip those? So if your classmates are listening to this, right, what's some of the things that you're going to be doing in the next weeks and months coming up that they can come and they can join with you and they can get equipped?
Yes. So we actually have our meeting this week. We have a meeting this week. You've sent me some of those Patriot Academy things. We're going to go over some of those in our meetings to help equip them. And then Turning Point has some pre-made slideshows that we can use to show students and help equip them and show them what we're doing and what we believe and why we believe those things. So we use those in some of our meetings.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Is there any specifics that you know right now? So like you said, if your classmates are listening, hey, this is the class that we're doing. Come show up.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll probably do a Constitution class this week because in our government classes right now, we're focusing on the Constitution right now. Everybody just took the Constitution test or is about to. So we're going to focus on that in our meeting on Wednesday.
So in your Constitution classes that you're doing in school, are they talking about the original intent? Did they talk about what the founders talked about a lot, or did they just kind of talk about how it is now? And
they didn't really talk about it, actually. So that's why we're going to talk about it. They gave us some little homework quizzes that we were supposed to do on our own time to get ready for the quiz, and then we just took the testing class. So that's why I think it's important to talk about the original intent of the Constitution.
So do you guys have some free constitutions to hand out to anyone who shows up at the class?
We do. They come up. We have an activism kit, and we have many constitutions, and we're going to give them all out.
Yeah, they get free stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, show up for
Point
the Turning Point Faith Turning Point High School chapter for Ozark.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you come to any of our Turning Point Faith stuff, we'll give you free stuff too.
Yeah.
But
So, Brett, I got a question
sir.
for you, a specific question. And I'm not asking for an answer right now, but I would like you to consider how to communicate to me, to Juanita, to Brian, to this generation that's kind of in charge right now, not doing a very good job. I would like you to consider how to communicate to us, how we can help set you in a position to where you can go ahead and set things right.
Yeah.
And I don't want an answer now, but I want you to consider that. That's something we really need to start praying over. And if you would, in your prayer time, would you pray for my generation?
Yes.
That we would start hearing and recognizing the call of God on your lives, and
Absolutely.
that we would be willing to go ahead and submit ourselves to whatever it is we're supposed to sacrifice to be a part of that.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, the kids always laugh at me, even though we're not spring chickens ourselves. My biggest nemesis is people my age. I get very aggravated at them because I'm like, how old are you and why are you so disengaged and so dumb? Because you see them voting like their grandparents and their grandparents before them voted. I mean, if it had a D on it, if it was a stump with a D on it, they'd vote for it.
Yeah.
And all they care about is their Social Security. All they care about is,
me.
Me. I just want to choke their little white-headed necks. I just do. And I hate it, but I feel very antagonistic.
That was not an actual threat.
I feel very antagonistic toward my generation.
Yeah.
I really do, and I feel bad for the way that they treat you all, because there's a whole lot more to you guys. You're like I said, I think your generation is God's secret weapon. And whenever I said and opened it up with "Welcome to the handing of the torch," and we've got a lot of work yet to do.
That's right.
Kevin and I do.
Yeah.
The years that we're left here,
Right.
and as long as Brian's here, and there's a bunch more of us in this area.
Yes.
And we want to be helpful to you guys. And part of it's getting information out.
I would rather hang out with you than be on a cruise ship.
Oh, gosh. Throwing up after you get sick.
have you been
from
on a lot of
MRSA.
cruise ships lately, Kevin?
I've never been on one.
What would you say? And I guess we've kept this young man long enough. This has been wonderful.
Yes.
What would you say? Is there something that you would want to tell people, to leave people with?
Yeah. I mean, my generation is more than what it seems. We're not just a bunch of kids doing nothing.
No.
We want to be active. We want to make change. We want to change the way it's always been.
Yes.
It seems like almost the political climate has stagnated. They just stay the same. They
Yes.
go with what they've always been told. We want to change that. We want to do what's right. We want to change for the better.
I believe that. I believe that. Did you guys have anything else to add? Or
I have a quick quote, because you guys know me. Brett doesn't know me quite that well, but I'm frequently quoting founding fathers.
yes,
And
love
so
it.
John Jay, because a lot of times people hear this quote and they'll say, well, this is for us to do for the young people, but I think this is also a charge for you in your generation. And this was about how do we set forth a plan to keep our nation what it should be, what is originally intended to be. And John Jay had said, every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution of his country and to teach the rising generation to be free. By knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they are violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. And that's what you're doing by starting this Turning Point chapter. You are helping to equip and teach that rising generation so that they know their rights and they can defend those rights that aren't given to us by the Constitution. They're enunciated in our Constitution, right?
Yes.
These are God-given and inalienable rights. And those around this table, those who have been interviewed by the mugwumps in the past, and you joining that group.
You're a mugwump, by the way.
All right.
Sorry, you are.
But you are helping that rising generation.
Yes.
Even though you are part of that rising generation, you're carrying on the tradition of our founding fathers and doing what they said needed to be done for posterity, because they didn't live for themselves, right? They lived for others and they lived for future generations. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. And this has been wonderful. And if you want to come on again, if you got some stuff to share about your group, even if it's a few minutes or if you want to take a little bit longer, you let us know. But if you want to, or if you have somebody you want to bring on that you think, has something, you guys have something to say, we would welcome that. So, so you keep in touch with us. You bet. You bet. Like I said, that's why we're doing this at the age of 65 is, we're not retiring, so we might as well be doing something useful to help you guys. Yeah. Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today, and we hope that you have been encouraged by our visit with Brett today, as we all saw a vision for a much brighter future than we had imagined in America. God's going to bless us. Be encouraged, folks, and we will be back again soon to bring you more information, to keep you informed, inspired, and always independent. God bless.